Hi everybody, welcome to the video. And this one we are going to be working on a vintage 1950s Omega Seamaster. It belonged to an acquaintance's grandfather. It does tick some. It actually does tick quite a bit, but not particularly well. There's a problem with the stem. We want to get this running as best we can for our friend Mr. R. And in solidarity, I'm wearing my own vintage Omega. It's a bumper automatic. Well, here are the baseline numbers to see what we can improve on. Our rate is at plus 104 seconds a day. The amplitude is pretty low at 152. And our beat error is a little off at 2 or 3. We've got this under the light and it's pretty clean except for I do see a spot here close to the 11 o'clock marker. It's not highly noticeable, but I can't really clean that off. That's usually a problem with the undercoat. But there may be a little bit of debris that we can clean out of here later. I'm guessing this originally came on a strap. Just looking for a good spot to slide the case knife in. And here we can see this is caliber 490, which dates this to the mid-1950s. A few scratches on the movement. Go and get these screws for the automatic works removed so we can get it down to basically the base movement, the timekeeping part. I'm just trying to break the tension, not really pry. Using these brass tweezers because they're less likely to scratch. And screwdriver's not going to work, so I'm gonna have to grind this tip down to get it to fit. And this is how we do that. It feels like this needs quite a bit more sharpening, so I'm going to take this over to the counter and work on this screwdriver tip so that we get a proper fit. Yeah, so if you don't have a properly fitting screwdriver, they'll slip, and it's probably what caused a lot of these scratches. Just comparing these screws, they are different. Again, just breaking the tension on the balance cock here. So if this is held down by one screw, we call it a cock. And if it's held down by more than one, we call it a bridge. We have to be very careful here because you'll see that fine little spring is coiled perfectly in a spiral there. It's very easy to damage. And now we're going to remove the cock that's over the pallet fork. And the pallet fork is what you hear ticking back and forth. You see the stones, the pallet fork stones there. And one of the issues that we have is the stem sometimes pulls out on its own. You're supposed to either loosen a screw or press on a spring loaded button to release the stem, but that just pulled out on its own. These are case screws. They tighten clamps that keep the movement in place inside the case. Just 2 little screws and just 2 little small metal plates. And we'll go ahead and uncase the movement. And our hands will need to be turned aligned so that we can remove them with less risk of damage. You can see here on the crystal there is an Omega mark there. I'll just zoom in here and make a still out of it. That's a sign of an original Omega crystal. Put our hands away. Nice little container. I use plastic here to keep from damaging the dial. I'm going to loosen the dial feet screws. This secures the dial onto the movement. Just 2 little tiny screws. They will work the dial loose from the movement and get it away. It's our hour wheel. And we'll remove the cannon pinion. And here's a clue of another problem. If you have a little experience, if you look in here, you'll see something else wrong. But we'll remove the screws for the setting bridge here. Get those off to the side. Yep, there should be a little arm there, a little spring, an extension. And it has snapped off. We'll get that part ordered, and we'll be on the lookout for the rest of it somewhere in the movement. Our minute wheel, this little intermediate wheel. Just checking to see if it's chamfered on one side so that we make sure that we get it oriented correctly when we rebuild it. Got to be careful with the spring, make sure it doesn't jump out. But before we get that, I'm going to go ahead and remove this little tension bar. Haven't seen that design before. And I'm going to put some Rodico here to hold that spring in place while I work the yoke free. The springs will fly off. They're under a pretty significant amount of pressure. I'm going to go ahead and get the setting lever here out. And this winding pinion. Note that the winding pinion has these gears faceted on the other side. They engage the sliding clutch pinion here. That's what the yoke fits into. And now we'll retrieve the spring. That's an interesting shaped one. I haven't seen one shaped quite like that. Usually there's kind of a very simple horseshoe shape. And we'll get this wheel off here. This wheel is interesting. Looks like it has multiple parts. I'll have to look over the documentation to see exactly how this comes apart. This is the click spring in here. It puts tension on this little rocker here. If I turn it this way, there you can see the tension. And that's what you hear click when you wind it. And again, we're going to sharpen another screwdriver. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this is why this movement was scratched up. At least one watchmaker, I'm guessing, did not prep their screwdrivers to fit these screw heads more snugly. Go ahead and remove the click. And a little click spring here. Now we'll remove the bridge over the train of wheels. I do have sort of a technique on how I arrange the parts when I remove them. Just helps me keep it in my head a little better. Come on, you. I also like to have my screws upright on the heads, like that. Gently lift that up. Get these wheels out here. Sorry if I'm not very conversational. I haven't worked on one of these movements before, so I'm checking the pivots here. They seem okay so far. Yeah, so if I'm not conversational, it's because I'm concentrating, as I probably should be. That's our escape wheel. The funky shaped wheel is the escape wheel. And now we'll remove the bridge over our barrel, which houses the mainspring. And this is going to be most likely the reason for, or the biggest reason for the low amplitude. I'm guessing the grease is really gummed up the mainspring inside. Or the mainspring could just be old. Lift this guy up. And we'll lift up our barrel. That's where the mainspring is. So this is it. This is pretty much stripped down except for a couple of cap jewels. We call this the main plate. I do like to take a couple of different photos of the parts, different angles, because the light might reveal something. And we'll start with cleaning. We use some pegwood, which is a very soft watchmaker's wood. Rub away any grime. I'm actually going to soak these parts. We'll work on the automatic works later. Got to figure that out. And need to figure out this guy here still. I'm guessing this is the first time this movement has seen proper cleaning. It's not uncommon for the crown wheel to have multiple parts, usually 2 parts. But looking at the documentation, I noticed there's another piece in here which could have, possibly gotten lost if you're not aware of it. Also helps to know how this goes back together, because it probably would come apart during the cleaning. So a 3-piece crown wheel. Get our barrel opened up with these tweezers. Get the lid to expose our mainspring. See if I can pull this out without disaster here. Sometimes these things will pop out of here, fly through the room, usually right at your parts on the table. I'm actually going to pull this off camera. This is the arbor that spring mounts to. And you can probably hear my cat, Dodger, squalling. I'm busy, Dodge. We'll go ahead and get our parts sorted out in these trays, get ready for cleaning. I'm going to polish the tips of these pivots with a little piece of silicone here. Not using a lot of force, just enough to kind of not really remove any metal material, but remove any debris on there before we clean them. Just a little extra precaution. Here's yet another screwdriver I've had to sharpen to get this ratchet wheel open. It's a monster screw for a watch. Let's see if we can figure out how the rest of this comes apart. This is I was surprised when I looked at the schematics, so check this out. This is a complex little dude. Come on. There we go. So yeah, wow. So yeah, let's get these into cleaner. And through the magic of editing, we have our first batch of parts, clean and dry. Adding some braking grease onto the side just helps keep the mainspring from just sliding freely to help it wind. This is our new mainspring. Got to make sure it's oriented correctly and pressed on the outermost edge that you can so that it slips into the barrel rather than springing out, making a big mess. I'm adding some D5, just a touch onto the spring and onto the bottom of the barrel there. Slide our arbor in here. Just a little bit more lubrication before we slide our cap on. I'm going to press the cap down with this little tool, and now I'm going to move it, press again, just to try and make sure that it's even all the way around. Checking for some play. It feels pretty good. And you can check to see that it's winding around the arbor by rotating and see that it's got tension. Temporarily putting the balance back into the main plate so that we can clean it separately. You have to clean it separately because it has shellac that hold the jewels in place. That and the pallet fork, which you can see here in the bottom of the jar. So 2 minutes. Drop this in some watchmaker's paper and gently dry it off. Oops, don't go too far. And just a little inspection of the balance to make sure it's rotating nice and freely. And that's swinging away pretty nicely. It generally will swing for almost a minute when things are really put together well. All right, let's get you back into a safe place. Well, it looked clean. Maybe it was clean, but I noticed some patina. See here? So we'll get busy on this. And this is some of the less complicated bits of watchmaking. And this is the part I'm most worried about. So I did some test fitting, and the barrel had worn an oval into the pivot where it mounts. So I'm going to have to close that up by hammering on the top of this, and then I'll have to bore that pivot out. And of course, I forgot to hit the record button during all that, but parts are properly fitting and cleaned, and now we'll get our reassembly on, starting with the escape wheel. Get that into the pivot. Now our seconds wheel. Remember, this is not a center seconds. I'll put a little lubrication on the shoulder of the shaft there where it contacts the jewel. Come on. Once we get these wheels, they all have to be in those pivots on this side because it'll be next to impossible to get the bridge on if those aren't already in place. It's a little lubrication where the center wheel goes. I've worked on a few Omegas before. Get our train of wheels bridge on, at least roughly in place, and we'll nudge. See if we can. Nope. Sometimes these fall right in place, but not today. Okay. Check the wheels. I think that's it. It turns with the blower, so that's a good sign. Little lubrication, little D5 for the arbor. I haven't put the screws in for that bridge yet because I want to be sure that, there we go. Yeah, see the escape wheel spinning there? Okay, so now I'm going to put the screws in for the bridge. So yeah, I worked on a few Omegas before. Worked on a Speedmaster with a caliber 861. I think the most recent one I worked on was an Omega DeVille. I have videos for both of those. So I'm holding this down with the Q-tip to make sure it doesn't shift around. And you want to be gentle as you put these bridges on because you want to make sure your pivots are in place. I like to check as I go. And when I'm dead certain everything's in place, I'll give the screws a final tighten. I don't retighten. I just will leave the screws a little loose. I'll check. And then I'll go ahead and tighten the screws. A little lubrication for the top of the arbor. And a little bit here where that wheel drags. Some more D5 here. crown wheel sandwich. A little more D5 here, because we have one more part comes in contact here. Line it up with this screw hole. Get this screw in. So yeah, I was really curious and looking forward to working on this movement. So I'm very grateful to Mr. R for trusting me with his grandfather's watch. This is the spring for the click. And remember, it's got a little bit of tension. You can see this thing dance around. You can see how it could just ping off. I'm holding it down with a little homemade tool. Make sure, nudge this into place and make sure that it's set. Come on. Okay, and a little D5 for where the click goes on that post. Click situated correctly by the spring. So you just want to make sure it's oriented so that it provides the tension on the correct side of the click. And that's correct. I did something right. Okay, I'm looking at the technical guide, trying to arrange these parts in the correct order and orientation before I get started. A little D5 here. Get this situated. And a little D5 here. And a little D5 here. So one's on the side of that piece and the other was on the base of that wheel. Let's washer down. I guess it's a washer. Another bit of D5 where this slides. Yeah, a little D5 here on the contact point where this slides in. This screw is awkwardly large, this little wheel. And I'll get the ratchet wheel in over the arbor. Just gonna hold this down with my finger to let me tighten this all the way. Time for the dial side. This is just some D5 on the shaft here where the cannon pinion is friction fit. Well, our replacement setting bridge hasn't arrived yet, so we still have the broken one. That's what interacts with the setting lever here. But we'll go ahead and use it until the replacement arrives. Some grease in our winding pinion, and we'll stick our sliding clutch pinion on top. Some grease on the sides and the tip of the stem. We're still waiting on our replacement stem as well. But we can proceed and have the watch ready for when they arrive. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of excited about how this watch is gonna run. Just some D5 where there's some contact from the wheel on the post there and on that rail on this post here, and also where this little hole where the little setting lever here slides in. And the setting bridge is what holds in place when you pull it in setting and winding positions. Put this little tension bar. This is what you press on the other side to release the stem. And some grease down in this groove, on the sides of the groove, where the clutch goes. I'm gonna go ahead and oil these pivots while I'm here. 90-10 light oil. And our clutch. Get our clutch over this little post and get it down into the groove there of the sliding clutch pinion. And get our clutch spring in here. Using a coffee stir, no less. It's actually my favorite technique on these. Intermediate wheel, where this little shaft we lubricated earlier. And then the minute wheel, we also lubricated the shaft and the rail there earlier. Let's mesh that up a little better. The setting bridge, which has two jobs. One is to hold all these parts underneath in place. The other would be for the arm that's missing to engage with the setting lever on that little knob on the setting lever there. Which I never found that broken arm, so I don't know. It must have fallen out at some point. I'm gonna use this old oiler to open up this shock setting. It's a little spring with tabs. Slide underneath the little grooves there. They're designed to hold those jewels in place and still have enough give so that if there's a drop, the pivots for the balance won't break. You can let these air dry, but I'm kind of feeling impatient. So you want a little tiny bubble of oil. And we want to place this without disrupting it. And see if we can nudge these tabs back under the groove. Come on. Sometimes they snap right in, sometimes I'll have to try a different tool. You can see down in there. All right, let's get this under the other side. We still need to lubricate these pivots with some light oil, 90-10. Typically, if there are jewels, I'll put 90-10. If there's metal, I'll put D5. And anything really heavy, I'll use a heavier grease. This is the pallet fork. This is what we hear ticking. Get this into the pivot. This is often a piece that gets damaged during reassembly. Those pivots will get snapped because it's not reassembled correctly when people tighten the screw. Nudge this cock over the pallet fork pivot. I'm going to just tighten this until I feel tension and check the tail of the pallet fork to make sure it's moving freely. That's good. And so the pallet fork is what holds and releases the power. So we can now put some wind in it. And we'll check to see that this tail now snaps under that power. Just needs a little bit of initiation. Yep, that's good. Okay, I'm not going to use all of this oil. I'm just going to lightly graze the face of this exit pallet stone. And then I'll click this back and forth about 4 or 5 times to advance the escape wheel, and that will spread the lubrication. And we do this 3 or 4 times until all the teeth are lubricated. So we'll skip over some of that in the video. All right, now we can get our balance back in. We just have to make sure the impulse stone is on the correct side of the pallet fork and get our pivot lined up. It almost went. This one's a little trickier. Oh, sometimes just I think this needs to be tightened up is all it is. I think there's just enough play here that once we get the screw in here, it'll be fine. And we still need our part and get our arrow wheel in. Well, it looks like it's running better. We still have one more jewel to go. That one there in the balance, on this side of the balance. And then we'll need to let it run for a day or two before we really getting meaningful readings out of it. Pop the sky. There we go. Get this guy washed up. Tiniest little drop of oil. Sometimes I can get this perfectly the first time, sometimes it takes 5 times. Well, it's not quite. I think we're in now. I'm just gonna check these tabs here. Yep. Still needs to run longer to get a true accurate reading, but I went ahead and do it on the time grapher, and we're seeing better amplitude and an improvement in the beat error, so that's good. Okay, on to the automatic works. This is one of the more intricate designs I've worked with. It's probably a better way to start this, but this is where I'm starting. This is probably where I should have started. Let's take the rotor off. Remove this little tension plate screw. That's an interesting design. It's very similar to that tension plate on the dial side. Now remove this little bridge. I'm not quite sure how many wheels are under here. I can't remember the diagram. Coax this little guy up. And we have one that's sticky. It's not too sticky. So a couple of wheels. Remember the orientation of those pivots. Yeah, this little guy is kind of like a little ratchet. Spring there in the bridge. I think I'm gonna leave this here. I'll just clean around it, but I don't see much benefit of taking that out. This looks like a reversing wheel assembly. Okay, let's get these into the parts cleaner. Hey, our part arrived. You can see the little spring arm there. We'll go ahead and get this old one off so we can make sure we indeed have the correct part. Lines up. I'm just going to put a little bit of grease here where this metal and metal contact is. Now for the moment of truth. Setting. Winding. And I'm gonna have to polish the rotor and re-clean it. It has that same kind of grime on it. Alright, see if we can get this complicated bit of kit back together. This little ratcheting arm here against that spring. This tiny little cock that holds that in place. See that spring action? Looks correct. We'll go ahead and get the bridge on. Moment of truth will be when we get this all back assembled and back onto the movement to see if it actually interfaces correctly and winds the watch. Some 90-10 on these jewels. Some D5 on these metal on metal pivots. And we'll get our automatic works bridge back onto the movement. Little D5 where the rotor goes. And now our little fastener here. This is a little early to assemble this. I just want to test it. So I actually will remove this so that we can assemble the watch without damaging it. So I gotta confess, I actually enjoy polishing crystals. So we'll clean up the crown a little bit. And this is how you actually remove the stem. So this is the replacement stem. And this is the replacement stem, the longer one next to the one we're replacing. And it looks okay, but if I can turn it over a little bit, you'll see that little ring there, that lower ring is broken. And I'm just taking a measurement here for how much to cut. This part is not hard to do, but it is very easy to make a mistake. So I'm measuring twice and 3 times. So I snipped it and I'm gonna remove the burrs, prep it for the crown. Still a little long. So we just kind of slowly grind our way down until we get it the right depth. This is a mild thread locker just to help secure the crown. Get our hour wheel on, get that meshed in, and our dial washer to help hold the hour wheel down. Loosen our dial feet screws. Line this dial up over the center post and the seconds post. Should just about get the feet where they need to be. Gently tighten these screws down to help clamp the feet. You don't want to force the dial because you'll bend the feet and that'll create all kinds of problems. Try and clean the indices up a little bit. Looks like a loom plot might be missing. I didn't notice it having loom. Get our hour hand on. Just kind of place it and then we'll press it with this little hand tool. Our minute hand. Just check, make sure they're not going to collide, that they're going to align properly. See if we can work our seconds hand over this tiny little post. This is harder than it looks, but that one went on pretty easily. Just gonna give it a gentle nudge. And we'll check to make sure it's not close to the dial and case it. Get our stem in here to help align the movement inside the case. Now we get our case clamps and screws in place. Sometimes these will slip down, get lost in the movement. In worst case, it's deep down in the movement and you have to disassemble things. But these behaved. And our last screw is the one to hold the rotor in place. That looks good. The rotor's not free spinning too much because it's got quite a bit of wind already. We've got our case back and our gasket. We'll snap those together. And I think considering the age, it looks pretty good. I can't take too much credit for that, but hopefully it runs as good or better than it looks. Okay, I've had this running for a few days and the rate is pretty dialed in, at least on the time grapher. The amplitude is okay, it's not the strongest, but it's also not fully wound. The 1.8 milliseconds beat rate is acceptable. I know we like to chase 0, but frankly it's negligible when it comes to accuracy. And since this doesn't have a regulating organ for that, it would require manipulating the collet on the hairspring, which is just a little riskier than is necessary for the relative gain on that. And it's a beautiful watch. I really do appreciate Mr. R letting me work on his grandfather's watch. I'm sure there are a lot of memories tied to it. And I hope that he's able to create some new ones and pass this watch down to someone else. But there's no rush in that, so not anytime soon, okay? Again, it was a privilege to work on this watch and have you along in the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, take care.